The torturous treatment of asylum seekers and refugees by the Australian government might not have been the most light-hearted topic to start this video off, but it is an important one. Hello, welcome back to another video. This one's a little bit more organised than last time by a minuscule amount, but I'm sitting upright, so that's 90% of the journey. I am grumpy and I wanted to talk about something that annoys me, something that grinds my gears. We're going to talk about Novak Djokovic and the response to him being put into the Park Hotel compared to the treatment of the refugees. So I've previously read about maggots in the food being called detainee instead of their names, a fire, cases of COVID, cases of these people being mistreated in this Park Hotel and other refugee prisons around Australia. And this has been well documented for a while because these people have internet access and they're actively asking for help. I've yet to see much media coverage of the situation until Mr. Novak COVID. Oh, that sucked. Till Novak showed up. The Australian Open was supposed to be on. Novak had an exemption for being vaccinated to come and play the Australian Open. The government chucked a hissy fit and detained him in the same place that our refugees have been detained, in the Park Hotel. So then we had a whole bunch of media attention on the hotel where these people are being detained. You have people protesting that Novak's even in there on one side, and then the people protesting that some of these refugees have been in there for 9 years on the other side. Some of these refugees went on the project to talk about it because it gained media attention, as the media obviously flocked to film the place where Novak was being held and ran into the protesters and the refugees that are fighting for their freedom. The Australian government's now gotten Novak out of the Park prison, and I'm yet to see him comment at all on the situation. Isn't surprising, but upsetting. But the raised awareness into not only like how many people are in there and how long they've been in there, but also to the living conditions that they're subjected to. I just think if having no tennis court is one of the biggest problems that Novak was facing in there, that's a pretty good run from what I've heard of the treatment of the detainees in that place. So it's probably easier if I just read this. This is a post from a pedestrian TV that I will probably bring up somewhere. But the headlines, it's pretty fucked up that refugees are still being detained while Novak Djokovic is set free. So world champion tennis player Novak was let out of a makeshift detention centre in Park Hotel in Melbourne, where 33 refugees and asylum seekers, some of whom have spent up to 9 years in detention, remain confined in their rooms' 4 walls. While Djokovic's situation has made headlines around the world, locally it's shined a light on the way that our government treats our refugees in this country and reflects the double standards between men in power and disadvantaged people in society. Not very far into a human rights degree, but from my understanding of law, psychology and human rights, to keep these people in there and to keep them in danger of COVID, fires, infected food, there's just a breach of human rights. You cannot do that. People that have been released with no financial aid and have had to fundraise a lot of their supplies, I guess, to live. Anyway, I guess I just wanted to talk about that first and get that out of the way because it sucks and it highlights how much our government sucks, and it's just an all-round shitty situation. So we'll discuss the worst first. I don't even know how we treat people this way, but here we are. My cereal's super soggy. The second thing I wanted to talk about, the myth or the rumour that periods synchronise in groups. Because I remember when I was quite young, everyone would always say that when you hang out with someone enough, your periods would synchronise. The general consensus is that they don't synchronise. So the pheromones did have an effect, but not necessarily a synchronising effect. When looking at it just in sort of a case study where you have a lot of different people who have their periods living in one area together, there was no evidence of them synchronising. Another theory was that the moon seemed like a fitting dictator for our reproductive energy. The word menstruation and menses even come from the word moon and month. More recently, I think this has just been overall debunked. A lot of the research was very, very flawed, and given our current knowledge of the statistical errors in those studies, it's been entirely debunked. Do periods sync up when you hang out a lot? Probably not. Is it more a case of that you notice when your period is in sync with someone else's than you notice when yours is out of sync because that gives you the conversational focus point? Maybe. Is it just fun to have someone else to suffer through the pain with? Probably. And I remember in high school we were all like, oh, our periods have synced up. And I wanted to know if that was actually true. And the answer is that it's not. No. And it's also not determined by the moon. I was picturing the moon from Bear in the Big Blue House, like, bleed! I'm very familiar with the issues of periods and bleeding. Through having to get used to troublesome period, I've learnt a hell of a lot about doctors dismissing women's health or people with uterus's health and dismissing pain and issues just as hormones or something normal that happens during menstruation when it's simply not. The amount of people that I know that have been misdiagnosed when they were actually had endometriosis or something similar, like ovarian cysts or something, is stupidly high. I've had first-hand experience with these doctors. I started bleeding uncontrollably at about 13, so you can imagine no gynecologist really wanted to see a 13-year-old. So they sent me around to every specialist ever. All of them were quite dismissive of my pain, and I kept on complaining about a certain pain, and I was like, no, this isn't the same, it's not my cramps. And I was adamant it's not my normal cramps. They dismissed it, me being a young person with a uterus, what would I know? And then when they eventually did a laparoscope, they found that I had something cyst that had a tail wrapped around everything, and I was correct. And I know countless people with pretty much the exact same story. We can't all be going to these doctors and then being sent away with naprogesic pain meds and being told to get on with it when this many people have this much trouble with their reproductive organs. How can you just ignore that when it's a whole bunch of the population that are reporting these issues? I also want to discuss the importance of, even if you've seen 10 shitty doctors, try and see the 11th one and see how you go, because you can't do this stuff on your own. I know how disheartening it is to essentially be made to feel like you're lying about your health. You really do have to just keep trying. You have every right to stop seeing a doctor if they just don't mesh with you, and you have every right to demand the treatment that you need. Hopefully the future holds a bit less sexist medical practices, and I think it's probably changed a fair bit from when I was 13 to now. Obviously I can see a lot more doctors because I'm 25, and it's a bit less weird to see a 25-year-old with these issues than it is to see a 13-year-old. But I don't think we're all the way there. Just something to talk about. If you've got any similar shitty doctor stories, drop them in the comments, or don't if it's too private and you don't feel like doing that. That's fine too. So if you can hear that noise, I'm playing with this. I ordered a bunch of fidgets in the mail and they should arrive by a bunch. I ordered 2, but I got one of the tangles and one to chew because my anxiety makes me chew the inside of my mouth to the point where it swells up, and I don't want to do that anymore. So I will have a necklace that has a little chew thing on it. It took me a couple of months to actually buy one, because while I shouldn't feel ashamed of needing something like that, sometimes there's automatic feelings of shame just from, having these behaviours that are abnormal. There are things put in place to help, and I might as well use them. It's just another aid. It's no different than cuddling my dog when I'm sad. It's just something that makes life more comfortable for me. I will update you on how effective I find them. So I ordered them from Fun Fidgets, Sensory Toys and Fidgets. They are NDIS covered. I'm hoping at the very least I'll stop chewing the inside of my mouth to the point of hurting myself, because that's not fun. And the whole point of this video was to complain about periods, to debunk the myth that periods synchronize, and to say that that's probably lucky, because if they did synchronize, half of my friends in high school would have bled for 8 years straight. So I wanted to raise the point of the treatment of our refugees in Australia, because we should all be screaming it from the rooftops at this point, contacting our government to tell them to fucking pull their heads in. Karen Andrews is the head of immigration at the moment. I can post her phone number somewhere. There are also really good email templates on Rise for Refugees or some of those Instagram. They will actually post a template for you to email on to the leaders and representatives. It's just really important, so it was important to bring up in a video, because no one should be treated like that, and it's fucked up. When I learnt about my bleeding, I was sort of told to consider myself lucky, because in a lot of places it's against religion or it's against their laws to take some of the medications that stopped me from bleeding to death when it was happening. I became the longest living person, like I bled for the longest alive, but there was many girls that just died from it because they weren't allowed the medical treatment that I was because of where they were born and where they grew up. And I just think that's disgusting and really makes me thankful for the medical treatment I did receive, despite the fact that a lot of the doctors were shitty. If you've got the access to the medical treatment, take it, because not everyone is lucky enough to do that. Take it with a grain of salt as well, because uterus havers health, it's very misunderstood. I think it's been very male dominated, so there's probably a lot of room for some research into menstruation. Anyway, drop some cool menstrual research in the comments. Side note from editing me, thank you if you watched the video to the end. Sorry, it was a scrambled mess of my thoughts currently, but I think that's what most of this YouTube channel is going to end up being, so that's fine. I'm coming at you real soon with a cover video. I was thinking about doing cover videos with like 3-ish songs in each, so it'd be like my favourite love songs, and then cover 3 or 4 of them that I just really enjoy. Anyway, let me know what you think about that. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.